The 13 days after we awoke were the beginning of the end.
Final Fantasy XIII was released in 2010 for both PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 after 6 years of development. The hype was massive upon release and the game got a lot of attention from both fans and critics. Since FF7 and FF10 were massive hits, players around the world were eager to see the first Final Fantasy in HD. But shortly after the release, the negative voices became louder and louder. FF13 was a big departure from previous entries in the series, and many design decisions alienated longtime fans. Some even dared to say that it was one of the worst games of all time, which is, of course, greatly exaggerated.
You serious?
Be quiet.
Best of luck. They all want to fight.
Good for them.
I wasn't a big gamer when the game came out in 2010, but I was immediately hooked when I saw gameplay and trailers on YouTube. I watched the heated debate over the game for 4 long years. Over the years I became much more interested in gaming. The days when I would not play a video game would become rarer and rarer. In 2014 I decided to take the plunge and bought a used copy of FF13. And what can I say? I loved it. With 40 hours on the clock I completed my first playthrough, and I even invested 50 more hours to earn the Platinum trophy. In the same year the 2 sequels, FF13-2 and Lightning Returns, followed, both of which I enjoyed a lot. Another playthrough happened less than a year later, and now in 2017 I completed the game a third time, and I still think it's amazing, although I understand that the game has its flaws and why a lot of fans dislike it. The game begins with a gorgeous looking intro cinematic. Cutscenes in this game look absolutely incredible, and the design of the whole world is nothing short of breathtaking. Since the 7th installment of the series, the setting changed more and more to steampunk and sci-fi. With the 13th installment, that transformation seems to be complete. The whole world around Pulse and Cocoon is very futuristic, and there aren't many elements that one would describe as classic fantasy. Technology is the focus and is found everywhere. The game starts right in the middle of the story, which unfortunately makes it quite hard to follow. All main characters have their own motivations and meet each other coincidentally. At every turn, new and foreign terms are thrown around, and the characters and perspectives change every few minutes. The game follows a group of 6 young rebels. They were given a task which they don't want to fulfill but need to in order to survive. 13 plays in a world where humans and Fantasy live together. Fantasy are sentient godlike machines that are powered by a crystal. They build Cocoon, a giant floating sphere in the sky that protects the people from the dangers of the planet that lies under it, Grand Pulse. The Fantasy provide the humans with energy, warmth, food, but they rarely intervene in the day-to-day life of the humans. Everyone lives a calm and happy life, although many fear the dangers of Grand Pulse. Fantasy can give humans a task, a so-called focus, which they need to carry out. Only a short vision gives a clue about what the focus is. Humans that have such a focus are called Lassie. When the focus is completed, wonders turn into crystal. If the person fails, it becomes a horrible creature called Thief. 2 worlds in battle. A few days ago, a Pulse Fantasy was found on Cocoon. All citizens around that evil Pulse Fantasy should be relocated to Pulse by force, out of fear they could be contaminated by Pulse. The game follows a multitude of characters, at the head, Lightning. The stoic young soldier makes her way to the Fantasy because her sister Sarah was given a focus by the Pulse Fantasy.
Sarah! Time to go. We have to leave before the army. What?
That's a Pulse brand. That girl's a Lassie.
I already told you that.
Pulse Lassie are the enemies of Cocoon.
So they should die?
Listen, if she fails her focus, you know how that'll end.
And killing her is a mercy? You came.
Sarah!
Sarah!
Sarah! Sarah!
Why is she turning to crystal?
We'll see who fulfill their focus, are transformed into crystal, and gain eternal life.
Just like the stories say.
Sarah, sweet dreams.
Meanwhile, the citizens set an order to relocate and cite an insurrection, so that 5 of the 6 main characters fight together. While the citizens fight the military outside, they explore the Pulse Vestige in search of answers. With all their strength, they defeat the Pharisee that lives inside the Vestige, with the result that they get turned to the sea as well. From this moment on, the group needs to find out what their focus is. On top of that, they need to defend themselves from their pursuers and fight monsters that become tougher with each step. The story of 13 is really interesting and, in my opinion, one of the best in the entire series. Unfortunately, the story does not get explained very well, especially in the beginning. The world and its terminology is quite complex. Thankfully, there are data logs which appear after almost every cutscene in the menu. These logs explain everything that has happened and is happening in detail. These are obligatory if you want a chance to know what is going on. The data logs, however, are just a stopgap for a much bigger problem. The story is paced badly in the beginning. Reading long texts in the menu while playing a game is not good storytelling at all. However, the high hurdle in the beginning gets lower with each following chapter, but it's definitely a barrier for new players. The sad thing is, Square Enix should know how it's done better. In FF10 the player is also thrown right in the middle of the plot, but at the same time the story is much easier to understand. This is in part due to the main character being a time traveler. He is exposed to the world and new plot developments in a much more natural way. Game design against trends. Final Fantasy XIII is linear. Highly linear. Upon release, this decision was the source for a lot of debate, and now, 7 years later, this kind of level design seems quite outdated. Nowadays it seems that every game is going open world, including Final Fantasy. Prior to 13, Final Fantasy games were quite open. The first few were so open-ended that the player had to look for the next objective. When the games became more focused on story, the goal was clearly given. The characters traveled from town to town, which were connected by a huge open map. FF10 ditched the world map and let the player only select different areas through a list. The single areas were also quite linear, but there were bigger towns now and then that invited for exploration. FF13 was the game that popularized the term linear. And yes, if you look at the maps of the levels, you can clearly see that there is just one path you can take. Every now and then there are small optional paths that lead to a treasure chest. Each corridor is full with monsters and enemies, which are always visible. The player can sneak up on them, avoid them, or fight them head-on. The last option is usually the best, because with each battle you collect crystal points. Those points can be spent on the crystarium to strengthen your characters. At some point the level design is mixed up with controllable vehicles or movable platforms, but usually the design stays linear. What you won't find in FF13 are big cities filled with NPCs or side quests. Instead, the player battles through hordes of enemies and is rewarded with amazing looking cutscenes every so often. And here's the big problem: when you don't understand the story, or when it's not engaging to you, there's little reason to continue playing. When you aren't interested in the battle system or the story, you won't have much fun with 13.
Let's be rational now.
The battle system for 13 is revolutionary. It combines the classic turn-based battles with real-time battles. The most important element is the so-called ATB bar. This bar fills up continuously throughout the battle and is used up for each action. The bar is split up into different slots. A normal attack costs 1 slot. Later, stronger attacks can cost 3 or 4 slots. You always control one character. The other 2 characters are controlled by the paradigm system. Each character has different roles. The Commando deals physical damage, while Ravagers do magical attacks. Sentinel and Medics are self-explanatory. In addition, there's the Synergist, who buffs the party with positive status alignments, and the Saboteur, who deals negative effects against enemies. Each character has 3 roles at the start. Later, every character can use all 6 roles. In the menu, the player has to build different paradigms. If you set one character to Commando and 2 to Ravager, the party quickly brings down the HP bar of an enemy. When the party's HP gets critical, the player should switch to a defensive paradigm like Sentinel, Medic. 6 such paradigms can be created and then switched on the fly in battle. Another important element is the chain gauge. Each foe should ideally be blocked into stagger mode. In this short time period, the foe is vulnerable and its defense is low. The Commando does not let the chain gauge go up by much, but it does not go down that quickly either. While the Ravager, on the other hand, lets the gauge get up quickly, but it falls almost as fast. A combination of the two is ideal here. Single actions must no longer be selected from a menu. The player's attention should be focused on all the different bars on screen and to select the right paradigm at the right time. For the rest, there's Auto Battle. You select Auto Battle, then the foe you want to target, and the system automatically selects fitting actions for the current situation. Critics may say that FF13 is simple button mashing, but nothing can be further from the truth. In later battles, one has to switch paradigms at light speed and keep an eye on the party's HP to keep up. And not always Auto Battle is the right option. Some abilities need to be chosen manually. As with the story, the battle system starts really slow, unfortunately. In the beginning there are no paradigms, no chain gauge. The system opens up bit by bit and new possibilities come up. The 6 characters split up eventually, and in the sections where you just have 2 characters with limited roles, you really learn how each role works. Just 2 characters and no Commando available, you need a new strategy. Along the way you will also learn how the AI and the auto battle system works. Only after the first half of the game the player can choose the party by himself, and all characters can learn all roles. That is of course very late, but it doesn't bother me at all since each chapter is new and interesting.
Home sweet home. Welcome to Grand Pulse.
The design of the world around Pulse and Cocoon is nothing short of amazing. It clearly goes in a sci-fi direction, and that is not a bad thing. Cocoon is technically very advanced, while Grand Pulse seems to be stuck in a more classic fantasy setting. This conflict between old and new works perfectly and makes the world all the more interesting. The developers clearly show that sci-fi and fantasy can fit together. The levels are unbelievably detailed at times. I corked myself quite often while I was standing still and admired the level design and effort that was brought into the world. All the character animations are also top-notch, so is the voice acting. Previous entries felt quite forced, especially 10. The FMV cutscenes surely are the highlight, even though there aren't that many in the whole game. The in-game cutscenes also look quite good, but the switch between the two styles can feel quite jarring at times. Music is a very subjective topic, but in my opinion, 13 has the best soundtrack of any video game ever made. This is quite a statement, but I really feel that way. I regularly listen to the soundtrack on my phone, and it's just that good. Each scene is underlined perfectly. A mix between orchestral and electronic tracks is presented, and sometimes the two styles work together in the same track. This is also another point where 13 plays with the conflict between old and new. FF13 does things differently. It consequently breaks with many traditions the series has established over decades, but this fact alone should not keep anyone from trying the game. Players who cherish open worlds and exploration should keep their fingers off this game. However, players who look for an amazingly presented story and a very good battle system should definitely give FF13 a fair chance. At this point I want to bring up the term Final Fantasy disease, which was brought up by Hajime Tabata, the director of FF15. Everyone who has played a Final Fantasy has certain expectations of what a Final Fantasy should be and what not. But Final Fantasy itself stands for change and progress. Each entry tried something new. In order to keep the series relevant, it must strive for new goals, although not everyone agrees with every decision. Just because something doesn't fulfill our expectations, we must not reject it immediately.
It's a pickle, all right. But the bird says no.